like she said, my name is Casey Brooks. I'm happy to be here with you all today. I won't try to hold you. I see some sleepy faces. But, you know how they say you never know how something feels until you have experienced it yourself? Drinking and driving was not something my family discussed at the dinner table at night, and death was the furthest thing from my mind. When my parents dropped me off at a party, before I got out of the car, they never said, "Watch out for any drunk drivers out there." In school, we learned more about dangers of having unprotected sex more than the dangers of drinking and driving. Drinking and driving was never something that affected me. It was the least of my worries. So I thought. When I watched the news, I saw more killing than anything. Nothing but people killing other people. So a drunk driver killing or injuring someone close to me wasn't something that crossed my mind. For as long as I can remember, my father had been a cop with the Maryland Transportation Authority. I remember in elementary school, he would just be coming home from work when I was getting up for school. I was always happy because I could never see him before I went to sleep. He worked the night shift. But I got to see him in the morning, and that would just make my day. He had always been a hard-working man, always at work, even on his off days. I might not have been aware of drunk driving, but one thing I did know was that being a cop was a dangerous job. And that was something my dad reminded me of quite often. But you know how you never believe or think something could happen to you until it does? My father was Superman to me, so in my eyes, nothing could happen to him. I remember one day he picked me up from school. He said, "Let's take a ride." I asked him where we were going. He told me just sit back and enjoy the ride. On the way there, we were listening to music, enjoying the weather, enjoying the ride. It was a gorgeous day. 15 minutes before we got there, he turned down the music and said, "You know what my job is, right?" I laughed and kind of dismissed the question. He said, "I'm serious. I want you to know that my job is very dangerous. God forbid anything happens to me." I said, "Okay, Daddy," real sarcastically. I didn't want to talk about anything like that because, again, he was Superman to me. He was untouchable. Well, again, so I thought. Until New Year's Eve 2007, I found out he was indeed a hero, but not a Superman. New Year's Eve started just like every other year. I woke up excited about bringing in the new year. I was just months away from graduating high school, senior prom too. I never really went out on New Year's Eve because of the things you always hear on the news the day after. How somebody got shot downtown, somebody got mugged, you know, the new stuff. Fights always broke out, and at night people got crazy. My cousin and I decided that we would rather enjoy New Year's at her house. My father was working as usual, always working. That day I decided to color my hair blonde. Never tried it before, but it was something new for the new year. Why not? My dad always talked about me and my mom because we were always doing something different to our hair. Of course, he loved everything about me the way it was. I remember after I saw the way my hair looked, I looked to myself and I thought, Daddy's going to look at me and say, "What did you do now?" I could just imagine the look on his face. I knew I wasn't going to see him until the day after because he was working, so I was going to surprise him. When I talked to him there, I didn't even mention it. I had the opportunity to talk to him twice that day. Both times I made a comment asking him why he had to work that day. It didn't seem fair that he had to work on such a holiday like this. But he was so dedicated that even if the opportunity presented itself on Christmas, he would work. I knew my father was a hard-working man, so I didn't complain. I just looked forward to seeing him the next day. As it got closer to midnight, my mom dropped me off at my cousin's house. The first thing we did was bake cookies. She made the best chocolate chip cookies. The first thing, we watched movies, did each other's nails. It seemed like time was moving so slow. Finally, it was almost 11:30. And usually my family gathers in the kitchen to watch the ball drop, but this year it was just us. But of course we went to the kitchen anyway. It was better down there anyway. My cousin and I will always talk about how much we have grown in a year, how much we have matured, the fun times, the good ones, the bad ones. A new year is about moving forward, being thankful for the previous year, but also looking forward to what's about to come. All I could think about was prom, graduation, moving forward to college. I was excited about getting older and accomplishing more with my life. I wanted to make my dad proud, like I was proud of him. Now it's 11:30 finally. We changed the channel to get ready for the ball drop. Her parents went in the basement, so we decided that when the ball drops, we were going to go run downstairs and scream Happy New Year. But instead, we got a phone call that changed our lives forever. The phone rang twice before my cousin answered it. She picks up the phone and starts to say, Happy New Year to whoever was on the other line, even though it was early. But before she could get it out, her face dropped. I immediately knew something was wrong. It was written all over her face. I asked, who's that? She yelled down the steps at her parents, pick up the phone. I asked again, who's that? Completely ignoring my question again, she told me to be quiet so we could listen to the conversation. She picked up the phone, and all I heard was my aunt say, it was a hit and run. Her voice sounded like she had just lost her best friend. Well, little did we know, she did. I jumped up and started crying before I even knew what happened. I heard my uncle on the phone, so I stopped to listen. He paused and said, Courtney Brooks, the only thing I could do was run. I ran as far as the living room before I dropped to my knees and started to cry. My aunt came upstairs to me and whispered in my ear. She said, we don't know what condition he's in. Put some clothes on so we can go see. I rushed upstairs and put on the first thing I could find. I didn't care if it matched or not. For all I was concerned, my father was hurt and he needed me. The whole car ride to the hospital, I thought, when he sees me, the first thing he's going to say is, what did you do to your hair? I braced myself for what was about to come. I prayed to God for the best, but I prepared myself for the worst. Again, so I thought. Walking through the hospital was like being in a zombie town. It was so quiet, it even felt like that. We finally get to where the officers were. We see his partner, and they direct us into the room. When I walk into the room, all I see is my aunt, and when she saw me, she immediately put her head down. We sat down, waited for a couple minutes, and the chief of police, Marcus Brown, came to talk to us. He sat down and started to tell us what happened. My uncle politely cut him off and asked my father's status. Chief Brown took a deep breath and said, he didn't make it. Again, I didn't know what to do, so my first thought was to run. And my uncle quickly put his hands out and caught me. And I just cried in his arms. And I remember him saying, this is a nightmare. I couldn't do anything but sit there and cry. My cousin was in my aunt's arms. I was in my uncle's, and we just cried. I got myself together. I walked in the hallway, took a deep breath. We waited for everyone else to arrive to the hospital. My aunt came next. I couldn't even look at her. Now I know why my other aunt wasn't looking at me when I walked in. I didn't want her to see me crying before she knew what happened. I remember she saw my uncle first, and I couldn't hear what he said, but she dropped to her knees and started crying too. She went to the room, and maybe a couple minutes later, she came up to talk to me. We had a conversation. We cried in each other's arms. We all cried in each other's arms. There was nothing else to do. My life had changed. My father had died by a vehicle of a drunk driver who hit him and ran. Our family started to arrive, and every time it was like the first person arriving. Like time just kept starting over. Nobody could believe what happened. Maybe an hour passed, and I thought, let me call my mom. It was about 2, 3 a.m. I went to the phone, dialed home. I woke her up out of her sleep. She answered, hello. All I could say was, Mom, Daddy's gone. After I said that, I started crying again. I couldn't say anything else. But I could hear her screaming in the phone saying, what? Oh my God, no. My uncle had to take the phone from me because I wasn't able to say anything. It seemed less than 5 minutes that my mother was walking through the door and she just grabbed me. I cried. I said again, Mommy, Daddy's gone. After she came, we stayed for another maybe 15 minutes and then we went home. I slept in my mother's bed that night. 17 years old, and I slept in my mother's bed. But I love sleeping in my mom's bed. Felt like I was sleeping on clouds, literally. I woke up that next morning thinking, why am I in my mother's bed? Because last night, like my uncle had said, seriously seemed like a nightmare. I heard my mother in the bathroom on the phone saying my father's name. I ran to my room, grabbed a picture of him, held it, and just started to cry. All I could say was, Daddy, I love you. That whole day, New Year's Day, was torture. I watched it over and over again on the news. My mom told me not to, but of course I wanted to see what happened. People kept calling and coming over, made it so real. So while everyone else was recovering from the New Year activities, me and my family were planning a funeral. Not how I planned to start a new year at all. I went through many emotions during the days leading up to the funeral. There were many times I would wake up in the morning and start to call my father, and then thinking to myself, wait, his viewing is today. Seeing him for the first time in the casket was an unexplainable feeling. Even if I began to describe that feeling to you, you wouldn't even imagine. I remember the funeral director saying to let all the immediate family go first. I was second in line to see him. I didn't make it up to the casket. I dropped to my knees and started crying. It was still unbelievable, but then again, it had only been a couple days. Hours went by, family friends came in and out of the funeral home. Day 2 was just as hard. Again, hours went by, friends and family came in and out. The day of the funeral, I woke up feeling like I was going to church, but instead of worshiping God that day, we were honoring another hero, Corporal Courtney Brooks, my dad. Saying the final goodbyes to my father was the worst thing I had to do. I took slow steps. When I had to go put my final rose on his casket, I sat there and just stared. Everybody else throwing flowers that looked like slow motion. I couldn't believe this was it. I just walked away in disbelief. I walked to the car, still crying. All I wanted to do was go home and go to sleep. Going back to school after a week because of the funeral was like me watching the news over and over again. I was constantly reminded, but I also had awesome friends who supported me and showed me that they was there for me. As the days passed by, I got more and more sorry for your lost cards. I was thankful for everyone reaching out to me and showing their love, and seeing how my father touched a lot of people's lives made me happy. A couple months rolled by, and then before I knew it, it was time for prom. That experience was difficult without my father. I know he would have loved to see me all made up with the heels and dress on. And then before I knew it, it was time for graduation. One of the biggest days in a teenager's life. Moving forward to college is a big thing. To not have my father in the audience broke my heart. Not seeing him when I walked out to see my family hurt my heart even more. When they called my name, I was listening for my father's whistle. His whistle was so loud. That was his way of finding me if he ever split up in a store. When I didn't hear his whistle, it hit me like a ton of bricks. He wasn't there. And it was then I realized I couldn't see his face when I saw the rest of my family. The presence of my family helped me keep my mind off him not being there. A lot of laughs, a lot of jokes, and more importantly, a lot of love. The summer flew by, and already I'm starting my first semester of college. I wanted him to be able to see how his little girl has grown up and is now in college. I got a 3.2 that semester. I know he would have been proud. As my birthday approached, the days, the months flew by, I became more and more motivated to tell people about what happened to my father and let people know how dangerous it is to drink and drive. I thought of ways to become active and help prevent drinking and driving, but nothing was really coming to mind. And then I thought about MAG, an organization we learned about in school. I see posters and stickers on people's cars all the time. The mission of Mothers Against Drunk Driving is to stop drunk driving, support the victims of this violent crime, and prevent underage drinking. Exactly what I wanted to do. I went to the website, but I wasn't sure of how to contact anyone, and then I didn't know if anyone would respond. I can't remember how I got there, but I got an email address and I just emailed them. I told myself, what's the worst that could happen? So I emailed them, told them my dad's story and how I was interested in helping and becoming a volunteer. Maybe a couple weeks later, I was walking to my car from class. I got an email. It was from Mad. They directed me to a woman by the name of Lisa Spignall. So I emailed her, told her about my dad's story, told her what I wanted to do, and immediately I was speaking at a ceremony filled with law enforcement officers. And ever since then, Miss Lisa, along with the MAD organization, has been a huge help assisting me achieve my goals and further my experience. Since that time, I've been telling my story to whoever will listen. It not only helps to talk about it, but it helps other people to see that I have regained some strength with such a tragic event happening in my life. You too can regain your strength. I am a true believer that time heals all wounds. Not a day goes by that I don't tell my dad that I love him. I am still recovering even though it's almost been 5 years. So I'm not going to say that it's easy. My mom asked me to see a counselor about 5 months ago because she knew something was wrong with me. Yes, I saw a counselor after my dad passed, but after a while I thought I was okay. Just last year, I dropped some of my classes in my senior year of college, partly because of the residual effects I was having from losing my dad. I didn't tell my mom, I didn't tell anyone. I'm back in school now. My mom found out, of course, but I will be graduating in May 2013. Thanks to Miss Lisa, I am now interning with MAD. If you or someone else that you know are dealing with something similar, I encourage you to seek counseling in these difficult times. I am not a counselor, but I am willing to talk to any of you. I can lend an ear because I know what you are going through. I was 17 years old when my dad died because of a drunk driver. And today I am now 22 in December. I want to leave you with this. We need to cherish the moments that we have with our loved ones because we never know when God will take them away. Please, I ask you to take a pledge. If there's anyone you know who drinks, please tell them not to drink and drive. If you know someone who drinks heavily, please get help for them. Everyone makes a choice, and my choice is not to drink and drive. Thank you again for your time.